been so inspiring to see people from all over the world really focused on some of the biggest challenges of the world today. And so what we want to do now is talk a little bit about the future of teaching and learning, what impact AI might have in that. And we just came out of, all three of us just came out of a really good session around AI, regulation, the responsibility for corporations and governments, and kind of how all of that looks. So I think a lot of that is going to be able to, we're going to be able to bring that up here today. We wanted to run the session a little differently. I'm going to ask Armen and Eugene some questions, and they're going to give us their expertise and tell us a little bit about their experience, and then we want to open it up to the audience, because I know there's a lot of you out there tackling some of the issues around AI, and we'd love to hear that. So I don't know if you read Armen and Eugene's bios on our app, but if you haven't, what I would like to start with, if both of you could please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now in the AI space, because I think you both have amazing backgrounds, you're doing really interesting things, so if you want to share that first.
I can go first. First of all, thanks, Neelam. Thanks, Sanjeev. I got roped into this particular panel because Sanjeev is making me sing for my lunch. I think I've been able to meet so many of you over the past day and a half, and I think there's so many brilliant minds here that could speak to this topic a little bit better than I can. So maybe what I'll do is I'll explain a little bit of how I think my background might fit into this particular topic, which is I spent a lot of time in the research world. I guess I've been a serial entrepreneur making, kind of spinning out companies out of deep tech research. And so I've done 3 of these companies so far, and they came out from doing various machine learning, deep learning labs. So I think where I fit into this particular topic is I love to be at the cutting edge of the research world and see how you can productize and apply it into things that touch the real world. And so that angle and that arrow of research to deployment is something that I've been thinking about a lot and have lots of opinions on. Maybe I'll stop there, yeah.
Before coming here, we had a brief conversation, and Eugene mentioned about imposter syndrome in this space, so definitely I qualify there. I think coming from this session that we had, there's so many really capable people know so much stuff about space of AI. Sometimes it's quite difficult to try to take it apart and try to explain what exactly you can be doing or what exactly you're doing. Most of my work is creating essentially an infrastructure for AI in education and research, or in commercialization of AI as scientific vertical. So I would actually create an environment where someone like Eugene will be able to do the research properly. This is what we've been doing for nearly 6 years now in Armenia, specifically in providing educational opportunities, research opportunities. On the research side, both fundamental research and applied research that then goes into commercialization of science. We focus in the space of AI. We do roughly 75% of our time and resources is spent on that, but we also look at biotech and advanced materials as well. But when you speak of biotech and advanced materials today, is also going back to artificial intelligence. We've founded companies that would deal with, let's say, on a pharma side with small molecules, but everything has been done on a screen rather than in a lab. So there's a lot of work also done in that space, and what we do is we empower those people to be able to do the proper work.
Armen, can you talk a little bit about the FAST program and that work? I think that's
right. So Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, essentially our mission is to create an ecosystem that will drive scientific advancement in Armenia. And the focus area has been AI, advanced materials, robotics, and biotechnology. We never got to robotics. It's a bit more complex for us in terms of time and resources, so we spent a lot more time in creating opportunities in AI. We just, roughly about 2 months ago, this was quite pioneering. We launched AI education in high schools in Armenia, actually in 16 public schools as a pilot project, starting in high schools. But we only got to that because some 6 years ago, I created a military unit in Armenia that deals with AI. So we were training, conscription is mandatory in Armenia. So we were training specifically boys. I have to emphasize on that because only men go to military in Armenia for the time being. So we trained 16, 17, 18-year-olds for them to qualify for this unit. And this was something that almost like forced us to learn how to deal with kids learning AI, which was kind of interesting. You know, it's like we were not planning for that, but we had to. So we created, say, artificial intelligence boot camps where we would teach them about machine learning and reinforcement learning, but then we quickly figured out we need to teach them a lot more about artificial intelligence as a vertical itself before even going to machine learning or reinforcement learning or advanced mathematics or Python and all of these things. But that 5 years of experience with them allowed us to scale it, and now we're offering this. It's a small number still, it's about 400 students, but the idea is in the next 3-4 years for us to have roughly about 5,000-6,000 young people, you know, kids in a way, in some instances, for them to go through these programs. So then we can create specialists. Last thing I'll say, we're the largest grant provider in Armenia in STEM, except the Armenian government. So Armenia is a relatively small country, for those of you who know. If you're it's under 3 million people, so it's landlocked, and the only path to prosperity for it is going to be scientific disciplines. You know, it's like no natural resources, no major industries. So then we said, you know, how do we focus on creating proper human capital? So we give out over $100,000 grants per team per year in Armenia. So it's about $500,000 grants for over 4 years. And we bring in principal investigators. So someone like Eugene, I would love to talk to you later about this, but someone like Eugene, we built teams around a principal investigator who is not physically in Armenia, but then focused again on AI. So we give 10 of those grants, so it's about $1.25 million that we give out in grants specifically for AI research. And it's been fascinating. We're supporting 63 scientists in that space now. We're doing specific AI work. All stuff.
That's amazing, thank you. Eugene, we didn't get a chance yet to talk a little bit about the current work you're doing around 3D. If you can kind of tell us a little bit about that, and any thoughts you have on how that work kind of lends itself to the education space.
I can break this down to two. I can talk about what this current company that I do does, and then I'm not sure. Let me think about the second part to that. But the first is, and sorry, I don't know if this mic is me or not.
I don't know if it's me.
Yeah. So, like, you know, when I hear panels like this, like AI, AI is like a term that's bandied around a lot now, and I'm like, what does this actually mean? And like, can we like reduce this into something that's that we can define clearly? One part of AI, I think that a lot of people talk about, is the machine learning side. And machine learning is basically just pattern recognition. It's like a large language model that you guys are using. It's basically like you taking your iPhone and like the next word that it's predicting is just a computer just pressing that over and over and over again to like come up with beautiful prose, poetry, things like this. The way that it works is you put a lot of data around the world into algorithm. and then and then that algorithm basically reduces it into a bunch of numbers, and then that's how again you're trying to find patterns in the numbers. So what we do as a company, it's a long way to say that we take one part of data, which is 3D objects, and people don't understand many aspects of this. Like a lot of gaming studios, entertainment studios, they make these 3D objects, but they don't label them or tag them, and they're not understandable. And then we generate text that describes this, so like captioning 3D things, tagging 3D things so that they're more discoverable, as well as like you can moderate content, you can figure out IP violation detections. This is the kind of the space that we're doing, like operating as more things become digitized in 3D. So that's like what the company does. It's basically, yeah, it's like it's a business. It's a business. That's all it is. I don't think there's much of a social impact thing that I actually have tied it to. With education, however, my link to it is it comes from deep research that academia is doing, and we're taking computer vision papers and we're quickly productionizing it. Maybe the thing that I'll add is, as it relates to this topic of this panel, I think a lot of these technologies feel hard to understand, but it will be very commoditized in the future. I think it's just a matter of time where most people will have access to using algorithms. And if you have the data to train these algorithms, a lot of the capabilities will be unlocked as well. And I think academia is having a reckoning moment because they bet on a lot of different machine learning models, and clearly one is winning out right now. So a lot of different researchers' work has gone like out the window, like 20 years of research just down the drain because there's an emergent winning model. Where academia is going and where kind of education sector is going is like, okay, how do you apply this winning model into a lot of different fields, and how does it affect different fields is the big question that I see higher education asking itself. And so the top labs right now are switching from foundational research to very applied, how is AI affecting the world in these ways? And I think that's like a very fascinating change. Because that type of social science thinking gets at what type of world should we create, which is inherently a value-related decision. And so as you think about, what types of systems you want to create, these are the questions that I think academia is wrestling with.
Great, thanks. That's interesting because when I think about the use of AI currently in schools and school districts, this idea around academia, if I could just say, let's change the word academia to governments and school districts and local governments and how they're looking at AI. And basically what's happening right now in a lot of these, especially in the United States, is corporations are coming to school districts and saying, we have the answer for you. This app is, can use some type of AI that's going to be able to assess your students more quickly and more efficiently, without a lot of research behind it. And these companies or these corporations are kind of winning these really big grants in school districts, and these apps are being used in schools without appropriate teacher training, without parents understanding exactly how this app is really going to be useful. Is this really going to get my student to learn more, read more, be better at math? So that's kind of one of the ways, I think the dangers that I see right now in some of these, especially in the United States, around the use of these apps. A lot of students go to school, they get a tablet, they have a ton of apps on there, promising all of these really interesting and hopeful things to parents and teachers. A lot of them are not really playing out. So assessment is one way in which I think there is a lot of potential within the use of AI. Another one I think is around supporting teachers, because one of the biggest challenges for teachers now, especially now more than ever, is kind of differentiating in the classroom. It's you have a classroom with 30, 40 students, and everybody has different needs. You've got the kids that are advanced and doing really well and need more challenge, and the kids that are struggling. So I think that's one way in which some of the 3D content can be used to really kind of support teachers in thinking about how to address all of the needs in the classroom. That's another one. And then finally, I think the third thing that's being questioned in the space of teaching and learning is around, I know you don't want to discuss ethics, but around ethics and how, a lot of students can now plug in whatever they want into ChatGPT and write a paper, right? There's that kind of thing that's going on. And can teachers actually really assess if this is something the student wrote or not? I know there are some systems that can help you identify something that's written on ChatGPT versus something that's written by the student, but that's kind of another concern. So around assessment, teachers, supporting teachers, I know there's a fear also of teachers losing their jobs because AI has a lot of potential there. And the area around ethics and students actually cheating. So those are kind of, I know some of the concerns that are kind of happening right now in the field. I'm just wondering from your perspectives if you have any thoughts on what skills students should be taught to prepare them in an increasingly AI-driven world. So are there specific skills you think that they need to really kind of be able to navigate this new world with AI? Armen, do you have thoughts on that?
First, thanks for not pushing on the ethics side.
Yes, you were both. Please don't talk about that. Yeah.
Education is quite complex. If you look at formal education, I'm talking about getting all the way from high school, getting all the way to graduate schools and what have you. It's about 450 year history. Then you got to ask yourself a question: why all of a sudden it got formalized? And I think with the Industrial Revolution, there was a major need for new managers, new support for the government, for the business, and so forth. So they institutionalized all of this. So it's actually private sector and government creation through push from the private sector when it came to formalization of education. Now you're asking a very important question in the new era where AI is playing more active and more aggressive role, and we really, it's like I would be arrogant to try to define what that world is going to look like. I feel that I'm overly primitive for me to know as to what that world is going to be like when AI plays more of a dominant role. Right now, it's still very dumb. As much as you feel that ChatGPTs help you, it's very vertically deep. If it's like many of these things won't know that, let's say, hummus is made out of chickpeas. Yeah. Because you haven't given them that data. So so that's one aspect of it. When it comes to education, I think the whole concept of education needs to be rethought, and we're looking at this. Actually, we applied for a grant. I don't know if you're familiar with United States. It's called U.S. Naval Office Global, and it's the only U.S. federal agency that is based and headquartered outside of the United States. It's actually in London, in the UK. So it took me a couple of years to invite them over for them to come to Armenia. Finally, they did. And we have this concept, we call it reimagining education. And it kind of wipes everything out, and it's a tabula rasa when it comes to education. And these guys, they only fund things. They're very similar to DARPA, but they're on the Navy side. But they fund things within the concept of DARPA, and the way DARPA funds, they look at projects that are extremely unreasonable for them to become a reality. So if you have a project that is very likely for it to become a reality, DARPA and this Naval Global Research, they're not interested. They would say, you'll find money either from a grant or from federal government, from a VC or somewhat. Don't come and bother us. If something has a very, very minimal chance of becoming a reality, they're interested in that. So this reimagining education, I did a presentation for them, and the response was, Armen, this is stupid enough that we would want to actually fund it. No, seriously, I mean, those were the exact words that they used. This is stupid enough that we would want to fund it. But why? Because we said, I said, tabula rasa, the whole new world, I think we're doing injustice by bringing our younger generation on a model that was established 400, 500 years ago, when the world was very, very different. And we're still pushing people to go get master's degrees, PhDs. I mean, imagine you have bachelor's degree, it's meaningless today. And I'm sorry, it's like for those of you who only have a bachelor's degree, I don't imagine any of you sitting on that. But it's really meaningless. There's no job. I think you're better off if you didn't have a bachelor's degree, but you had some kind of experience for you to get into that. So what we were proposing, when you look at formal education, there are three things actually. You're looking at curriculum, faculty, and infrastructure. Doesn't matter where you are. If it's high school or if it's PhD, you're looking at these three things. But in reality, we started looking at, so you have content, you have language through which you're going to take that content, and then you have process through which you're going to get. So if we put it on a map, you have knowledge point A and a person point B. The question is, what's the fastest way from point A to get to point B? Meaning, how do you take this knowledge and you put it in this individual? And we haven't got to a point where you can just, like in Matrix, you say, do you know how to ride a helicopter? You say, not yet, right? And it takes you seconds for you to upload. We don't have that yet. Until that, we still need to go through this process. So we came up with some new thoughts how to take content. The question was, what is content? And what content do you want to take into the person? And then what are the languages? For instance, we look at mathematics as a language. I don't look at mathematics as science or anything else, because let's say if you want to speak about hardcore physics, chemistry, biology, without this particular language, it's very difficult for you to speak physics, for instance. So you need mathematics as a core language. And Python is also a language, so is English. So we're saying, all right, so you need a set of languages for you to be able to speak content. And then the process, which I'm not going to get into, the process is the most critical, and this is where we were proposing, they said this is stupid enough that we would want to do it with you. And that's the process. What is the process of taking that knowledge and you put it in the individual? That's the critical. So I'm not responding to your question.
No, but it's
I'm not responding to your question. Only because I have no idea how to properly to respond to that.
It's a difficult question.
It's a very important question.
It's an important question, and just to add to that, I think those of us who have children now or planning to have children in the near future, you grapple with it even more, because the way you grew up, you had to sit on a desk and you were fed content that curriculum developers or the school district or your teacher or parents thought was important. And then you finished the chapter on multiplication, and then you went on to the division, and it's very traditional. Whereas now you can look forward and realize that maybe my kids don't need to know all of that. It's all already there for them. Do they really need to memorize all these facts and know where every country is and know all the capitals of every country, or that kind of content it's probably not something that they need to focus on. And so what is it that they need to know to be able to kind of navigate in the future? And so that's kind of the challenge, I think, right now in the field. It's striking this balance between the traditional and what we think education should look like, with kind of predicting what we believe it's going to be in the future. So thank you for that. Any thoughts from you, Eugene, on what we just discussed around what skills do you think students would need to know?
No, I don't think none.
But I think, Eugene, you probably, because of where you are and the space you are, you need a lot of support, right? So it's like when let's say you're acquiring support, I think you look at certain qualities that they need, and I think increasingly, because you're at the forefront, types of skill sets that people require. I think you have a lot to say in that space,
Thank you. Yes. Eugene?
The only thing I'll ask is, I think education, I think the most inspirational people in my life have been my teachers and the professors that I've had. I don't know if you guys feel that too, but I think those are the people who really got me to think about the world differently. And I think that's a very human relationship. I think that's like someone that's that's guiding you, understands your lived experience, where you're coming from. And I don't think AI can get that component of this. You can be more efficient at learning math or physics or whatever it might be, history. But I think that human relation part is something that we need to preserve. I don't know if AI will help us preserve that. So I'm not actually too worried about like, oh, this is going to completely upend because I think the core of education is actually on those, like built upon those relationships.
Thank you. So I think we have a little bit of time now to open this up to all of you. And for those of you that were in the AI session, breakout session right before this, you may have some thoughts. A lot of good content came out of there. But one thing that we discussed in our group was around kind of equity and access. And what we've seen over the last 15, 20, maybe even more than that is something which we've been calling the digital divide. So those who have access, let's say even to the internet, versus those who don't have a ton of access to the internet, and what the kind of divide that's created in the world. And so the question, if anybody would like to tackle this one, is how can we ensure equitable access to AI resources in education to prevent widening the gap? In some cases, maybe we can't prevent that, but if there are any thoughts on that question out there?
I'm not addressing that. I'm addressing it as an educator, and I think I want to move the conversation from the tech to education, and not to generalize education, and to just give it specific categories. There are 3 domains of learning in education: content, skills, and disposition. The content is the what, the skills is the how, the disposition is the why you're doing this. I think AI contributes a lot in terms of the content, in the one domain of content. My problem here is the most important thing that students need to learn is disposition, empathy, deep listening, connection with other people. I think that's where a lot, maybe for educators, the content side can be, for want of a better word, outsourced to AI to augment whatever the learning is. But then the education now should really move to that. I can cite you a lot of recent research articles about how education is, students are losing out not being educated about disposition. They'll just go to the skills, what they're about problem solving, troubleshooting, They don't really understand why we're doing this and what the larger issues are. So I would like us to go back to what the students are learning, look at the domain of content, skills, and disposition. I don't know, maybe AI can help with the disposition. I have doubts how it can be, but certainly in terms of content and skill. Now, as to the digital divide, it really comes in terms of the qualification trail and how AI would actually benefit people who are taking that particular trail that will assess you specifically on content and skill. And if you have access to those, then it's a little bit like if you have money, you go to a tuition center, and people who don't. It's a little bit about that kind of, again, we're talking about different economic privileges. Yeah. So, yeah, just really, I'm very anxious that we don't generalize teaching and learning, and we just look in terms of the domain, and I would like to offer that. It's very simple, content, skills, disposition. Where can AI come in to augment the student's learning journey?
Thank you for that. I don't think we're trying to, squeeze everything into just AI as kind of the future. I agree, dispositions are very important. One of the unfortunate things that happens, I think, in education is that there's little focus given to dispositions, which I think you were alluding to, and the focus is on your assessment and the grade that you get on the assessment, and that becomes very skills-based. So that there is that challenge. I agree, dispositions, and a lot of the work that we do at Asian Society is focused on those dispositions. And the widening of the digital divide kind of issue is very much, something I think that is a current problem now, and there is a fear that it's going to get even worse. Okay, other question? I want to add something. Yeah.
Let's just take 2 questions at a time.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's actually comments and questions, so I don't want to just Yeah.
So I'm speaking, wearing a hat as convener for the Children's Commission of the Hong Kong Government, where I convene the group for Hong Kong children with specific needs that includes children with special education needs in Hong Kong. And it's about 12% of our child population are children with special needs. And like other countries in the world, we are seeing a rise in this population. So these children have traditionally been hurt by the current education system in terms of being assessed, in terms of when they are assessed, given them individual needs to support their learning, and then they fall through the cracks and don't really go into careers that they probably should go to. So I guess my question is from that perspective, how can AI help kind of plug some of the gaps in assessing children and helping them? So for example, if you look at ADHD, a lot of kids with ADHD have frontal lobe issues, which means their executive planning capability is very low. They cannot come home and say, I've got this homework to do and I need to revise these subjects on certain dates. But can AI, do you see a role for AI in helping, I guess?
You want to take that? Another question?
Okay. My name's Henning. What Armen mentioned around the origin of our current education system, the next step I'd also like to just mention is that not only was that system built to educate, the people working in factories and in the industry, but also to remove the children from the household, right? To enable parents to work at factories. I think the reality has changed, especially now with COVID, quite a lot. So, there are risks with AI, but there's also opportunities where we actually, and this is what you're kind of saying with the tabula rasa, there's an opportunity where a lot of the countries have a chance to actually really, I don't want to say destroy, but maybe reformat how we think about schools. Do we even need schools? There was something mentioned around the social aspect of schools. There's other avenues that we can enable children to have that social learning, and I don't even know if the school is the right format for that. I work with a charity in the United States, which obviously is a very prosperous nation, but with a lot of extremes, and we have schools where, in high-need communities, where they don't even have books or pens or any kind of material. So, as you were saying, a lot of children are actually suffering in this construct that we have that is not called a school. So is there a totally different format where we can enable children to actually get the education they need, right? And the disposition, I don't know if that AI can solve it, but frankly, they're not getting it right now either in many instances, right? So I guess my question is just, do you see, for example, in Armenia, are they experimenting with having children not go to school altogether, or what's the concept that they're trying to experiment with?
Okay, so does somebody want to take on Shalini's question first?
All right, so if I'll come this way if you don't mind. I think whether we have AI or not, we need to revisit the whole educational framework. I don't think that's AI specific or AI driven. I think none of either the comment that we hear or the questions that you both are raising, this is really not about AI specificity. It's like this position, whether you mix AI into this or not, we need to look into it. ADHD, AI, no AI, we understand this issue more now than in the past, and now we need to look into it. In Armenia, they're not testing that yet. I mean, what we're proposing is actually that, to do it. We're not ready to bring it into a pilot yet. We're still working, I want to say, because we're working with neuroscientists here because we want to understand what the capacity of a child is and from what age, when it comes to memory, when it comes to aspiration, when it comes to motivation and things of this nature, that we don't need to figure this out. This whole thing has been done by experts. But we want to understand, is it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, whatever, where you can introduce what. But I want to shift to, it's like between all three that you're saying, whether disposition, I call it differently. I call it within the process framework, we look at disposition as well. I like to look at these things in the concept of sports. So let's say if you want to become a football player, not all football players are goalkeepers or forwards, but they all have their own pace and they all have their own position. And if for 45 minutes you run from one side to another, you don't do anything else. In that 45 minutes, you learn so much in skills that otherwise football technically does not give. But it allows you, it gives you an understanding of discipline, it gives you an understanding of winning, of losing, of being a teammate, member. It's like what it feels for you to win, what it feels for you to lose, what it feels for you, for your team to come together when you win, when you lose. When it comes to actually playing as a team, staying in your position, what it means to be in position, what it means to play home, what it means to play in other people's fields, all of these things, the only thing you've done essentially, you've run for 45 minutes. You didn't do anything. I mean, in the concept you say, I played football. But in reality, you picked up so many different skills that otherwise you would need to go through a whole set of coursework for you to obtain those skills. Coming to ADHD element in particular, my significant other works in that field, so there is a lot of knowledge that that goes into this in dealing with population that has. I don't even want to call it a disorder. Really, ADHD, I don't think ADHD, I'm sure many of you suffer from something of that nature. It's like sometimes I feel that I have ADHD. I probably do have ADHD, so maybe this is a disorder for me, but not for most people. I won't look at it as a disorder. It's really understanding that subset of humanity and knowing how to deal with them. And it's not really, again, it's not an AI issue. AI may identify from the data sources as to what that means in certain aspects of it, right? How much time you need to spend at a child, what their focus level is, on all of these things. It will be easier if you apply technology for you to extract information and then know what to do with that information, because extracting information is critical. Without information, you don't know what you're doing. You're blind leading blind, and I think extracting that information is going to be critical. Whether AI becomes that solution after that is a question for the future. But I think AI, not AI, but here it's data science, I want to say, right? So, it's not even an AI, it's like glorified statistics for us to really extract information on that nature and then transform the education to support them. Because teachers don't know. The problem is, you mentioned something about teachers, and you said, you look at teachers, Eugene, and it was like that when I was growing up too. In the classroom, teacher knew the most. It's not the case today, unfortunately. But teachers don't know really how to handle a population that is not typical. And I think that's where support of some kind of technology may be useful. So I said to me. So go ahead.
I think I really love the distinctions that you both are making about social. Henning, I don't know a good answer to your question, but just on the social kind of element, I think schools are a place where we gain social skills as well, and that's like such a huge part of our development. There's an author that I love named E.F. Schumacher, who wrote a book called Small is Beautiful. And one of the things, the funny images that he invokes in this is like technology has this like foot loosening effect. So if you think about you driving a car down the road, and if someone like cuts you off, you're like, F you, and like you have like road rage, and you're like you feel that rage, and you can like swear at them, but if the same person cuts you off on the sidewalk where they just like walk in front of you, you're like, oh, excuse me, like there's this kind of you have a very different reaction. And I think E.F. Schumacher talks about like how technology, when you wrap yourself around like steel, glass, things that make you move faster, it has like it actually dehumanizes the other, and there's like you don't have that same connectivity, and that's why he's kind of arguing, this is a gross generalization or like reduction of his argument, but that small is beautiful, and there's like kind of elements to in-person, real life like kind of connectivity. when we think about AI in these social scenarios, like digital platforms, social media, and how we're more digitally connected as humans, we have to be, I think, wary of what Schumacher was talking about with these like foot loosening technologies, and really make sure that our interactions in real life, these human interactions, are actually heralded and like as the core part of our education as well. And I think those are the sacred kind of cornerstones to kind of our educational systems that we shouldn't allow the AI to like just take over. I think those are really important to building that foundation of social skills, like the disposition stuff, the executive, like, you know, how we organize as teams. I think those are all part of, I think our education. I think a lot of people, when they think about AI, digital technologies, it's going to change everything. We're going to flip the classroom model. We're going to do all these things. You're going to go take your lectures back at home, and like, you know, the teacher will come help you with your problem sets. I think we just have to make sure that we have that more expansive view of education and what these institutions are providing. And maybe that's just what I'll add. I think that in real life element is sacred, and maybe kind of the humanist in me is like the thing that's the thing that I would love to maybe also leave with this group the most. Is that AI is probably just an efficiency game, and at the core, like what Neelam has been talking about, what Armen has been talking about, I think these relational elements are what we need to keep optimizing and thinking about as we innovate in this era.
And just to quickly address the question around, you know, school even needed anymore? Like, is that something, you know, that's been thought about, or something that's been reviewed? And I think definitely after the pandemic, you know, a lot of kids were at home, and schooling was a disaster for many of them, trying to do things on Zoom. And there are parents that I know that have chosen to now homeschool and are probably more satisfied with that experience. But again, that's very much, this depends on how much money you have. I mean, how many people can actually afford to stay home and teach their kids, you know? So that's I think something again to consider, you know, in the future. There are going to be a lot of kids, I think, that are going to have these amazing experiences. They're staying at home, they're not in a traditional classroom, and maybe learning things that they wouldn't learn in school. But then again, that still creates a situation where kids who can't afford that, or families that can't afford that, are still, you know, stuck in a system that maybe not be serving them the best, you know, in the best way. I think we have a couple of other questions.
Yeah, just a quick comment to the question too about you know, education. I'm from class 2007, quite a long time ago. You know, don't get me wrong, but probably I tried to pour some cold water, you know, on AI. I think, you know, the whole discussion, you know, and not your discussion, but the whole industry discussion gets a bit overheated. You know, even before, you know, we really think, you know, there were you know, only a few breakthroughs in AI technologies, but every company is like, you know, the AI, the future of the world. But my point about education is, you know, there are two parts, right? The hardware, no doubt about it. You know, AI will help us to have more equivalents, you know, that can help with the teaching and learning. You talk about the smart devices, the eyeglasses, whatsoever. But the tricky part is the content, right? You know, now we're talking about AI. You know, we speak English. You know, I'm afraid that this will fall into the same problem. You know, whether our AI system will be more like a user-centric. Of course, you know, there's, you know, also the China system, you know, they are also catching up. But the point is, you know, I used to cover Central Asia and Mongolia, and we also have some of our fellows from those countries. What about that? You know, right, you know, the language database right now, the whole world, you know, is built on like maybe 70%, 80%. The language is still in English, right? But the humanity is there's a lot of cultural nuances about humanity, right? You know, I can't imagine you just copy a US AI system and bring it to Mongolia and say, hey, all the kids can start, you know, from the beginning. You know, what about their cultural identity, right? You know, and not to mention there's also a lot of, you know, America is not the immigration these days. There's a lot of doubts about the identity, you know, the issues in America. So do you want to just copy the American culture and the ideology, you know, just to any other Asian countries and through AI? It's like a franchise of McDonald's. You know, that's kind of like a scary if you think about the past education. So my view is I very much agree with Eugene. I think the AI can empower the teachers and the students, right? But it cannot replace the role, you know, of the real world, you know, learning. You remember, you know, who's your favorite professor? You know, imagine if your kid's professor is a machine, right? You know, that's pretty sad.
One more.
Thank you very much. My name is Maro, and I'm currently doing some research in terms of artificial intelligence and combining deep learning and nuclear engineering, but I will not touch on that. And also, maybe I'm not touching on the education. I just would like to focus on maybe the future of your foundation, perhaps to Armen. As we know that the AI decision is binary, either yes or no, and also like there is a risk on that in terms of like the disposition that is mentioned, you know. I don't know how many of you have known there is a idea that people can get required by AI. So the interview will be done by AI. And if we know, this is quite risky as well, because the decision is based on the hard skill. So there is a set of requirements, so you have to have the height for I don't know what, and then you have to have some qualification based on hard skill. But there is no soft skill. So this is also maybe like connected with education, where the teacher assess without any empathy, you know, like so. My question would be, in your foundation, would you see there is a possibility of combining the decision between soft skill and hard skill in terms of making the decision in the AI itself? Thank you.
Either one last, and then we try.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I wanted to touch a little bit on the issue we've been discussing earlier around the history of learning of schools, and yes, you know, one of the historical learning structures is schools in order to have factories and to have a basic foundation of learning. That's true, but there is, I think, an arguably even more historical learning structure, which is for knowledge itself, right? For the purpose of expanding knowledge. And while AI is great, and I'm really excited to see where it can take us, right? But there is a difference, right? When we use Google Maps all the time, we get to a place where we don't actually know how to get there ourselves, right? We don't actually get to know a city because we just use Google Maps all the time. And so I'm wondering, you know, from your perspective, are there still some foundational areas that we do need to know? Is that something that we should still be continuing to teach so that we can continue to expand into untapped areas of knowledge?
Yeah, I think so. This might not be a fully satisfactory answer, but I'm going to try to combine a couple of questions here. I think there are ancient social practices that we engage with as humans. And one thing that I've been hearing a little bit amongst the Asia 21 crew is like the need for greater empathy. Some of even in the value session that Penny held, adaptability. We have these like very, we want to connect, we want to bridge. And I think technology and a lot of what AI has done is actually help like fragment and pull us apart. Again, maybe it's because we're wrapping ourselves around metal, glass, bytes, bits. And I think if I contrast that type of technology to ancient social practices of coming together like this in a room, having conversations with one another, trying to like bridge gaps, understand where someone is coming from, what they do, what motivates them. I think those are really important pieces of data if you can kind of capture it like that. We don't really have platforms or ways to have these types of this type of mixing and understanding people in that sense. I think Asia society is providing us with that opportunity. So how do you start from that, like the human processes of how we come together are able to build empathy, and then from that core ancient social practice, add the technology. Stop talking about the technology and then like we're going to conform human behavior to like, you know, new blockchain like modes of governance or something like this. No shade there, but I think we need to start from that our core human practices of like how we interact. How do you then use like speech-to-text algorithms to capture, transcribe that? Are there interesting synthesis models that you can do with AI that help us understand that at scale? So it's not just like one or two conversations that we're able to understand, but it's from a community that we can understand it. What are the different value systems that we can extract from that type of community? And is there a role that technology can play in that? That type of sense making that a community does, that a school does, that different, I think, this morning I woke up at 4 a.m. I was listening to a New York Times podcast about Arizona State University and like kind of controversies happening with with the Muslim students with Israeli students. I think these are all acts of empathy that we need to also be teaching. And I think I would almost want to flip the thinking of let's start teaching ourselves or reminding ourselves of those social ancient practices, and then see where technology can help us do that a little bit more at scale. And maybe that's the part that I would preserve as the core for part of our education system, especially in an increasingly polarized world.
Thank you.
Yep. So first, the short answer, yes, we're looking at both hard skills and soft skills for the gentleman with the question whether at the foundation we consider soft skills as an important element of education. Absolutely. As to your question, I'm unsure actually, really unsure, because so the first technology that we attained was fire. I don't know how to make fire. I don't know about you, but I absolutely have lost that skill. Never had it. Never had it. But we did. We did have it. I'm talking about us as species. We did have it. We don't have it today. Maybe some of you practice at home. I don't know. I've never done it. And I've seen on television how they do it, but I've never practiced it. But that's the important thing, because if we didn't know how to deal with fire, we would absolutely not be where we are today as species. No way. It was the difference between that species and where the civilization is today. And we forgot it. We forgot how to do that. I mean, we found other ways to carry it forward, but it's important also to look at it in that context. We found a way to carry it forward. No one has issue with fire today, right? But none of us know how to do it, which is insane if you think about it. It's like, if you look at this, it should not work, but it does work that way. Our society somehow moves forward without us knowing how to make fire individually. The reason I say this is, I keep repeating this about us being primitive species. I actually really mean this, and I know this is difficult for us, that we think we're smart, we have PhDs and university degrees. It's difficult for us to comprehend what that means. But I really feel that, at the intersection of biology and technology, we're so small in that intersection, and we feel too large about ourselves. If we believe into the fact that the universe has been around for nearly to 14 billion years, and our planet for nearly 4.5 billion years. And then the first single cell organism, nearly 4 billion years, and then us as species, like Homo sapiens, about 300,000, and then in this civilized world, some 10,000 years. We're not even a rounding error of a rounding error of a rounding error of rounding error of evolution. Somehow we think we are the kings of evolution. And now we're kind of crossing that natural selection to deliberate evolution, and we're scared of that. And I get it. It's because we're very primitive. This is why we're scared of this. But we're in the cusp of deliberate evolution. We don't know what that means. Yet we're doing this. And this is why earlier we were talking about all of this, policies and rules and regulations and control, because we're afraid of it. We only want to control things that we're afraid of. We're afraid of AI. We think it's going to hurt us. So we want to control it because it introduces things that we're not comfortable with. It changes things in the ways that we're not comfortable with. We talk about black box. Most of the things that are super intelligent, they are black box. Even basic game of Go, right? When it started already beating everyone, and no one could explain why it's beating everyone. So we question these things. I would want to leave this group with that thought process of what we are as species. Because when we talk about artificial intelligence, we speak about artificial intelligence, yet it's really not artificial because we're creating it. So it is extension of our knowledge into this domain that we feel that is different than us. It would be the same, if you think of photosynthesis, it's a biological process, you would say, because tree makes it. But a tree makes oxygen. I mean, it's crazy if you think it's a tree. So a human here makes this intelligence. It's a biological process. We name it artificial intelligence because we don't have another name to name it. But it's something that's human production. It's our production. And if this production comes and changes us, we're afraid of that because we're always afraid of anything that touches us. And perhaps the role of us, this species, is for us to create that biological next thing that's going to transform us into species that we don't understand. And we shouldn't understand. The same way, the last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up, if there was a way for us to go to that single cell organism 4 billion years ago, and you say, you know what, if you don't exist, I don't exist, and I'm your future, is going to look at you and say, you cannot be that, you're at least God. But in reality, that's what started, this is where we are, and maybe we're a beginning of something that we really don't understand the same way. That single cell organism has absolutely no way to understand us as species. Stop.
So I want to thank Eugene and Armen, both of you, very much for joining this and offering your thoughts. I think what I learned from this session is you are both so deep in your work in technology. You spent a lot of your careers doing this work, but at the end you really think about human beings and who we are at our core, and that is actually the most important thing. And so that was, I appreciate you both kind of offering that perspective. I recently heard or read something where yes, AI will be able to, for example, translate many different languages, but translation is not the same as communication. And so that's something that we have to kind of think about, right? So you're in a different country, you ask somebody where the bathroom is, but that doesn't mean you can actually communicate with people in that culture. So that aspect is the human aspect, I think, that we should kind of remember. And so thank you both very much, and I thank you for the audience for all their questions.